everybody, it's me, Fairy Clodagh, back for another story time. I'm here with my 4 fairy friends, Evie B, Ali May, Layla Bell and Jojo, and we're all ready for the story. Are you? Great, here we go. It's called Ginger the Giant Fairy. Fairy Ginger opened her eyes after a long day's sleep. Like all fairies, she slept while her human was awake, so she could look after him in the night time. Ginger's human was called Peter, and she loved him more than anything. As she opened her eyes, Fairy Ginger noticed something most unusual. Her feet were cold. As she wiggled her tiny fairy toes, she realised her feet were sticking out the end of her bed. That's strange, she thought to herself. My head is on my pillow right at the tippy-top of my bed, but my feet don't fit anymore. Maybe my bed has shrunk. Ginger sat up in her bed, yawned and did a big stretch, just like she did every time she woke up. She stretched her arms wide and was shocked to find that her hands both hit the sides of her room. Then she stretched her arms up and touched the ceiling. What on earth is happening? She said out loud. Ginger sat on the side of her bed and went over the night before in her head to figure out what might have happened. She had written in her journal about what her human Peter had dreamt about. She played a game of fetch with Jimmy the dog, and she sprinkled some of Peter's sweet dreams fairy dust on herself, just like she always did. Peter liked to mix fairy dust for her to make sure she slept soundly, but he did that often, so it wasn't unusual. As Ginger pondered, she realised her head was getting closer and closer to the ceiling of her fairy house. And it was then she realised she was growing at a super fast rate. She looked at her hands and saw them getting bigger and bigger. Soon she was going to be much too big for her home. There was only one thing for it. She had to open her door and go into Peter's house. Ginger bent down and peered through her keyhole. She listened as hard as she could and heard Peter and his dad upstairs. So this must mean that the coast was clear. Cautiously, she opened her red fairy door and squeezed herself out into Peter's playroom. Ginger stood up and realised that she was now almost the same size as Jimmy the dog, a very giddy cockapoo who was running her way with a quizzical look on his face. He ran over and licked Ginger's face. Ginger giggled and said, "Jimmy, I don't know what's happening. I'm getting bigger and bigger and I don't know what to do." Jimmy cocked his head and whimpered in confusion. Ginger decided to try and visit her fairy friend Lucy Lettuce, who lived in a house up the road. Maybe Lucy would know what to do? Ginger took one step out of the playroom into the hall and was about to take another when she heard something awful. Footsteps coming down the stairs. Ginger knew that if she was seen by a human, she would lose some of her magic, so she did what she had been trained to do: hide. She dove into the coat stand that was sitting in the hall and hoped that neither Peter nor his dad would see her sparkly tutu or bright yellow shoes sticking out the bottom. "It's bedtime, son," she heard Peter's dad say. Peter's voice was so close when he replied, "I know, Dad. I'll be up in a minute." Ginger watched Peter through the coats and realised she was now the same size as him. As Peter went into the sitting room, Ginger sighed with relief. She hadn't been seen. She was congratulating herself on her choice of hiding place when she realised the coat stand was lifting off the ground because she was getting so very big. Ginger made a dash for the kitchen and crouched under the table. She was about to head for the back door when she heard Peter come in. "I just have to write a note for Ginger, Dad," he said as he sat down at the table. Ginger's heart, which used to be very small but was now very big and growing, started to pound under the table. What could she do now? She closed her eyes and hoped that she would stop growing. Then, all of a sudden, she heard that special voice that she knew very well, this time closer than ever. It said, "Ginger?" Ginger opened her eyes and realised that she was now so big, that she was carrying the kitchen table on her back. And more importantly, that she was looking right into Peter's eyes. Hi, Peter. Yeah, it's me. I can explain, she stammered, with a tear forming at the corner of her right eye, partly through worry, but mostly because she was so happy to be speaking to her human, something fairies only dream about. Don't cry, Ginger, said Peter, as he threw his arms around her. You are the best fairy ever, and I love you so much. I love you too, Peter, she replied. Ginger closed her eyes as they hugged, and then noticed his arms getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Then she realised what was actually happening. She was getting smaller again. When she was small enough, Ginger flew up and sat on Peter's shoulder. She asked if he had any idea why she might have grown so much, and it was then that Peter's face reddened slightly. Oh, Ginger, I think it was my fault. I changed the recipe in my magic dust mixing set. I added a couple of extra pinches of different dusts this time, and that must be why this happened. Ginger was so relieved to finally have an explanation, and especially to be fairy-sized again. And then she realised that Peter seeing her had indeed made her lose some of her magic, the magic that had made her grow. So when she lost that extra little piece of magic, she went back to her normal size, with her normal level of magic too. They both realised that they would have to part quickly before she lost any more magic. As Ginger hugged Peter's right ear, he whispered, "It's been so amazing to meet you, Ginger. Talk to you in my next note." "For sure," said Ginger, and she flew upstairs with a tiny fairy giggle. Ginger and Peter went back to normality after that, but neither of them would ever forget this hugely, enormously magical night. The end. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you again very soon. Oh, please note, Queen Kate and the International Fairy Council have asked us not to reveal the exact recipe that Peter used, which has come to be known as Peter's potion in the valley. We don't want lots of giant fairies everywhere. Bye!